Welcome to the Edgar Allan Poe podcast with your co-hosts Vicky Ray, Nez, and Keith Chowgo. Exploring book to screen and everything in between, delving into the dark despair and the sinister world of Edgar Allan Poe.
Hello, welcome to Literary Legends Podcast, and it's our Edgar Allan Poe episode where we're discussing the Premature Burial and the film from 1962. And before we get started, let's find out who's with us. Today we have Vicky Ray. Hello, Vicky.
Hey, everybody.
And we have Rod Labbe. Hello, Rod.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're staying safe.
And before we get started, let's talk about our roses and thorns. This should be interesting. Rod, what's your rose and thorn of the week?
So rose and thorn is a good thing and a bad thing. Well,
same here.
The good thing is what?
I got the same thing. It's a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah, I guess. Well, there's nothing really bad that's been going on outside of these restrictions that are still on. They have been loosening up. I mean, I do go to stores, but I do wear a mask. And my sister's, the biggest thing that's been happening to me is my older sister, who passed away in March of 2019, had an estate, and I was the trustee of her estate. And I was told when I signed on to do this, which was a year ago, it was in June of 2019, that this would be a relatively quick process and was done within 6 months. Right, and it's ending now. It's ending now because the person that's in the mix that's throwing a wrench into it is our younger sister. There's three kids in the family.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And the younger sister, who was estranged, I mean, this is where all the little facets come in, was estranged from the older one, is picking her bones like a vulture to get as much money as she can out of her estate. And they weren't even speaking. They hadn't spoken for 7 years. And my older sister, who I lived with, made it clear to me she wanted nothing. She wanted our sister to have nothing to do with her estate whatsoever. But when she came to sell it, and she didn't have a will, so this is very important, get a will. Because if you don't have a will, anybody can come out and
it doesn't matter. I've had a friend that went through that, and she was married to her husband, and he died of pancreatic cancer. Yeah. And they nickeled and dimed her with ad litem lawyers because of the children. And there was no money.
Exactly.
And there was no will, but she was married to him. It was such a nightmare. And I can't, especially husbands and wives, make sure, domestic partners, you have a will, because that is true. That's terrible.
Oh, yes. Even if you're on the deed of the house, let's say you own a house, and you share ownership, like your partner has 50 and you have 50. They will uphold your 50%, but the other 50% is open for grabs. So that means that any creditor that wants to place a claim against the estate, or any relative, and of course a sibling or a child, will do the first one in line.
Isn't that sad how people... It's so sad how people lose their minds when it's supposed to be a sad, sobering thing, and you're supposed to love each other and show each other respect, and you're grieving, that people just come out of the woodwork looking for money. Yeah. I've seen it over and over down here.
Here's the thing. This is the rose now. Okay, that was the thorn. The rose has something to do with that. I found out from my younger sister after watching her on Facebook. She's a children's entertainer. She makes her money by going around to libraries and fairs and things like that, and putting on children's musical events where the kids all dance, and she can't do that because of COVID. So she has been severely impacted financially by this thing. She does it out of her living room and is asking for tips from a virtual tip jar. And when I saw that, I said, well, I'm going to give her some of my money that I'm getting from my sister. So I gave her some extra money that I didn't have to give her.
That's so sad.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
I sent it out yesterday. And I told my lawyer, and hopefully I'm through with him too. I mean, this will all end probably within a week, and then I can walk away free.
Blood-sucking lawyers.
Yes, well, I never dealt with a lawyer in an instance like this, and I never sold a home. All of this was all new to me.
Yeah.
And it was very hectic, and it was a baptism by fire. But hey, now I'm back in my home in Maine, and things seem to be looking up, so I'm happy about it. So that's mine. All right, I'm ready to hear you guys.
What about you, Vicki? What's your rose and thorn?
Mine's kind of like a rose and a thorn. I've had a few people that lost their adult children in the last few weeks, and that's the thorn part. But the rose part is use your friends, use your family when you lose somebody close to you, and don't be afraid to talk to people. And when somebody tells you that the grieving process is taking too long, pretty much tell them to fuck off.
Oh, yeah.
You take your time, and, because I've heard this over and over and over again. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you done grieving? And, I just in the last, 2 weeks, this has happened to 2 more people. And I lost my son in 2016. And you're not going to get over it. It's a life sentence. And I just want if you're all listening, my heart's going out to you. And that just pick up the phone and call your friends, call your family, call anybody to listen any time of the day. My phone is always on for you people. And that's mine.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And my rose and thorn, well, my rose is actually, I saw a show on Netflix. I know this kind of pales next to your too. It's like
you're just petty.
Show on Netflix.
Yeah, it's called White Lines. It's done by the people who did Money Heist, and it's quite good actually. Isaac really enjoyed it. Myself, I've enjoyed it. So that was probably my rose. My thorn has to be is I've been reading a lot of books and doing a report. I just finished Stoker Wild West, which was bloody fantastic.
I get those books.
Yes, well, I contacted the publisher, so hopefully we'll have a special show with those. So
Stoker, you mean like Bram Stoker?
Yeah, basically the books are fantastic. This is the second book in the series. It's Stoker, basically about Bram Stoker and Oscar Wilde, and it's all done in the same way that Bram Stoker wrote Dracula. So it's all done with letters and notes back and forth and diary entries. And it's all about they're hunting down vampires and what's going on in England at the time, which would actually spear off Oscar Wilde to write Dorian Gray and Bram Stoker to do Dracula.
Are they
on
Kindle?
Sequel, yes. Well, the first one is. The second one hasn't been released yet. And so I got an advanced copy of the second book called Stoker Wild West, which is takes place in the West and basically about supernatural and how they're trying to fight it as they're on a tour. But what's really excellent about these books is that they use real figures like Samuel Clemens or Mark Twain makes an appearance, or Calamity Jane makes an appearance, and she's helping them out. And in England they had Henry Irving. If anyone knows who Henry Irving is, he was head of the Lyceum Theatre here in London.
You like him, don't you? He's one of your favorites, isn't he?
Yeah. So it's a fantastic book, but I guess my thorn is because I've read this book and it's so fantastic that now when I pick up the next books I'm now reviewing, they kind of pale in comparison. So I'm like, it's like, oh, I just kind of want to go back to this and sort of thing. So yeah, when you read something great and you want to read something great again, and then the next book, and the new book I'm reading is really good. It's called Sins of the Father. It is good. It's just different. But yeah, so my thorn is after you read something great, or after you see like a great TV show, then things tend to slightly pale after them. So that's my thorn.
I watched Brain Dead last night with the little thing that gets on the back of your neck. It sucks out what through your head. I was just like, I was sitting there watching it. It's like, what the fuck am I watching? And I just could not stop watching it.
Well, I like the main character in that because I like the main character in that, the main actor.
He's been in a lot of stuff. I cannot remember his name right back, but I was surprised he was in that. I go, oh my God, I know that dude.
Yeah, Jeffrey Combs, that's his name, Jeffrey Combs.
Yes.
I wanted to mention about Stoker and Wild West. He actually had some kind of affinity with the West, didn't he? I mean, Quincy Morris was a Texan, and there's another a short story that I wrote where a Texan was at the Tower of London, and a black cat killed him by catching him in an Iron Maiden or something. And there was a Texan. It was a Texan. And so he has something to do. He was very interested in the Wild West.
Well, the Texan that you're talking about, he is. Bram Stoker did use his prototype in Dracula. He was the American. Yeah. He was the American
Quincy
prototype. Yeah.
Yeah, Quincy Morris. He was the hero. Wasn't he the one that died?
Yeah,
he died at the end.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of versions that I've seen of Dracula eliminate that character altogether.
I know.
Although Frances Ford Coppola did leave him in there, I think. He was in
He was. Version. I think that's the only one I recall seeing his character in from the original story, actually. And he died in it, a hero.
Yeah, he gets killed by one of the gypsies. But he gets to see Dracula die, I think. Yeah. I think he does.
Yeah.
It's very heroic. But it was this nice little, addition of an American element, but not just an American element, but this Wild West thing, which within the United States is even different. The Wild West is as foreign to me as it would be England, I guess, because what do I know about it? I know about Ichabod Crane and stuff like that, but nothing about nothing about the Wild West.
Well, the Wild West is becoming wild again, let me tell you. So,
well, I tell you, those people from Texas, they're a different breed, right, Mickey?
I think they're a different breed, but they kind of grow on you after 24 years. So.
Oh, you're not a native Texan?
No, I'm from northern New York.
Yeah.
Oh, northern, where? Like
town.
Where up in New York?
Watertown.
Is that near Terrytown and all that?
Oh, gosh, honey. That's way 70 miles north of Syracuse on the Canadian border by Lake Ontario.
Oh, you're way up there. Oh, my God. Yeah. You're way up by Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
It's where good taste goes to die.
Stop.
I'd love to see Niagara Falls. That's up there. I'd love to see that someday.
Oh, it's beautiful, but go on the Canadian side. It's beautiful.
Yeah, Canadian side's better than the American side.
Oh, is it really? Oh, yes, I didn't even know that.
Well, the American side used to have Niagara Mohawk used to have throw all the garbage in there, wouldn't it?
Oh, I know. Oh my God, they were like.
And at the bottom of it, it'd be like these chemical bubbles.
I know.
Oh, really?
You get on Made in the Mist, you're afraid you're going to turn into Swamp Thing, after you get off.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, that's not good. I mean,
that was about the 70s to 80s. They cleaned it up since then, but that was about in the 70s or 80s.
Niagara Mohawk, I don't even think that they're Niagara Mohawk. I think they're broke up like Ma Bell, kind of, sort of. Oh, wait, it's called the Grid now, or something Grid. And they send my dad nasty letters all the time, making my father think he's using too much energy. And let me tell you, my parents do not use that much energy. So it's just a weird system they got going now.
Yeah, it's nuclear. It's nuclear power now, isn't it, in New York State? So
I don't know. I think the closest. I don't think the closest plant we have. I can't remember. I know it's on Lake Ontario somewhere of all places.
Yeah.
They put it on.
They used to use water power. That's why Niagara Mohawk was there, because they used water power. But I think most of it's gone to nuclear power now. So
I don't know how that works. I just know that they're robbing everybody.
That's probably why everyone up there's got cancer. It's probably because of nuclear power.
No, yeah.
That's another story for another day.
Yeah, another podcast.
Yeah, another podcast. Everyone in Northern New York's got cancer, it seems like, or come down with it.
Oh, God.
So
seriously.
I guess, so speaking of death, that leads us to what we're going to do is cut to
Premature Burial.
Premature Burial. But before we get to Premature Burial, what we're going to do is go to Story Geek Podcast, and they'll tell us what to watch during the lockdown that you can download for free via Netflix, Amazon, or other means. So take it away, Story Geek.
What movies and TV shows should you be watching the week of June 1st? I'm Jay Shear, co-host of the Story Geeks Podcast, and here are the movies and TV shows you can watch from home. There are no new wide-release movies available for rent this week, So let's just jump right into streaming. Over on Netflix, you can watch Lady Bird, the critically acclaimed film starring Saoirse Ronan and directed by Greta Gerwig, who both also worked on Little Women as well. After reading the description for Lady Bird, I'm still not sure what this film is about, but it has a 94 on Metacritic. That's basically a must-watch, so I'll need to do that. And because this is the first of the month, a bunch of movies were added to Netflix this week. Here's a very quick rundown of some of the biggest films now currently playing on Netflix. Air Force One, Bad News Bears, Cape Fear, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Clueless, The Disaster Artist, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, The Help, Inside Man, Malcolm X, Silence of the Lambs, Twister, V for Vendetta, West Side Story, and Zodiac. Amazon Prime has also added a bunch of new movies. Here are some highlights from Amazon Prime. Heaven Can Wait, Hoosiers, Thelma and Louise, Urban Cowboy, Dirty Dancing, How to Train Your Dragon, and The Natural. Disney Plus doesn't really have anything new to offer this particular week, but Hulu has a bunch of new movies as well. New movies just added June 1st on Hulu are The American President, Casino, Charlie Wilson's War, Dave, Dirty Dancing, Fair Game, I Am Legend, and Thelma and Louise. As for my pick, I highly recommend the improv comedy show Schwartz and Middleditch on Netflix. Hilariously funny if you like improv. I also watched the Jeffrey Epstein docuseries, which was eye-opening and incredibly disturbing. It's a more factual account and doesn't get into many conspiracy theories, which I was kind of hoping it would, but it is still worth a watch. This week on the latest The Story Geeks podcast, we're talking about Onward, one of the last films that was in wide release in theaters prior to the coronavirus outbreak. You can find The Story Geeks podcast on your preferred podcast provider. Until next week, this has been Jay Shear from The Story Geeks podcast, and I hope you have fun streaming movies and TV shows from home.
Hello, welcome back to Literary License Podcast. We're discussing Edgar Allan Poe's The Premature Burial. The Premature Burial is a horror short story by American writer Edgar Allan Poe. It was published in 1844 in the Philadelphia Dollar newspaper. Its main character expresses concerns about being buried alive. This fear was common in this period, and Poe was taking advantage of the public interest. The story has been adapted to a film, which we'll be covering later. So, Vicky, what are your thoughts of the short story, The Premature Burial?
I really like this one. One, it's easy to get through, and it took me like 10 or 12 minutes. Well, usually Edgar Allan Poe, I love him, but it takes me a while to absorb or digest how he writes things. But this is one that I didn't have a hard time understanding. But he starts out with that narrative of all these horrible stories. I don't know if he got these as real stories about people who were prematurely buried. Do you guys know anything about that? Were these actual stories he came up with?
Well, that's quite interesting because the beginning of the story, before we get into the main character story, is that he does mention these like real life cases of people who were buried prematurely, and I found that fascinating.
So did I, in a morbid kind of way.
Now, what's quite funny now, my mom, when she died, we had her cremated. And the reason why we had her cremated is because she had this fear of being buried alive because her best friend, June, and after I was born, my mom and dad moved to a trailer park. Yeah, I'm that common, people. We moved to a trailer park, and her best friend, June, who I used to play with her son, Mickey. And something happened. They had to move the mom's grave, June's mom's grave. And so they went to move the mom's grave. And the coffin flipped open. And she looked like she was trying to tear herself out of the coffin. And because of that, my mom had this image that, oh my God, she was buried alive. Now, I don't know if she's buried alive, but this image stuck with my mom, so that she used to tell us from a very young age that if she should ever die, she wanted us to cremate her because she didn't want to be buried alive, like her friend June's mom. So,
you know what that reminds me of? Years ago, well, you guys know I studied archaeology, and I went to school in New Hampshire, and they would call my professor who used to do work for the state and stuff to come out. I think I've said this to you before, to investigate what was probably a colonial burial, but because the bones were like coming up through the ground, because they buried them 2 feet down, wooden coffins, they probably rotted and stuff. I guess the guy's dog was digging shit up and bringing bones home. But anyway, we went there and there was one that wasn't, she had blonde, remember, because she still had blonde hair on her skull and she had cloth in her mouth. I don't know why, but you could tell that she was probably she woke up and she was interred. And I never forgot that. And I can understand why your poor mom was probably scared, because there could be no worse way to go. It's morbidly fascinating in a weird way, because this is probably the best story Poe come out with, because he was so fascinated or obsessed with burial and premature burials and this and that. He was just a dark countenance. There's just no getting around that. But I mean, that was really morbid. It was gruesome to see that, because this poor person died and they woke up, because back then they didn't
embalm you, did they? They just put you in the ground.
No.
I mean, nowadays to be buried alive, they embalm you, so it's kind of like if you live through an embalm, being embalmed, it's gonna be very rare. So
right,
yeah,
you're definitely dead.
Yeah.
I mean, even when June's mother was died, didn't they embalm people then? I mean, it wasn't like colonial times, was it?
Well, I imagine I'm making an assumption here, but June said that her mom died when she was about 5 or 6, and she would be about the same age as my mom. My mom was born in 1945, so it's probably 1950. In a small town in upstate New York. So embalming never really it became was it like the 60s where it became mandatory, didn't it?
I think so, because my mother's side of the family is Italian, and Italians are so morbid when people die, but they bury you really quickly. And I remember I got pictures of my grandmother in her coffin, because that's what they did. we got
a bunch of relatives in coffins in pictures of the family album as well.
But they gave you 3 days, and that was before you start getting right back then. So they weren't embalming back then. Either that it was a religious preference, because Italians are really weird, because they want to take it all with them. I know,
Wow.
But they took pictures so that my mother would remember her mother, because she was only 2 when she died. But
pictures of her dead?
In the casket.
Yeah, it was a big thing. I got pictures.
I know people do that, yes.
I'll screenshot you a picture later, show you. I got a picture of it in my phone.
Well, I remember going through my grandmother had this great big box of pictures, and we go over there on Sundays, and I was always drag out these pictures, and I look at these people and sort of thing, and everyone was alive, and every once in a while there'd be someone in a coffin, and I remember it was like on one of those slides. And basically, I held this slide up, and it was a person in a coffin. And I go to my grandmother, I go, "Who's this?" And she's looking at it. She looks it up the light. She goes, "I don't know who the hell this is." And she starts passing it around to everyone in the family. Does anyone know who this is? I picture this person in a coffin, and no one knew. So in that box of photos, there's a person in a coffin that no one knows who it is. But I guess we just took pictures of everything back then. It's what we did.
Well, I think people back then, when people pass in our family, if somebody can't get there, you take a picture of that person so the other family can see them in repose, and so, I mean, you just want to remember them, especially if you love them so much. You just take it any way you can get it. But people were, I wouldn't even call it morbid. I think it's I don't know if Italians are ethnic or whatever you want to call it, but they keep pictures of everything, dude. I'm just saying they take pictures of everything.
The funniest story about death, my grandmother told me, and her great grandmother, this is what my grandmother told me, so I'll take this with a bit of salt. But basically, that side of the family were Irish. And in the homeland in Ireland, up in the Blackwater, County Clare, is where they're from, is that basically her great-great-grandmother died quite young. And in those days, what they used to do is they would pop the coffin up like it was standing up, put the person in the coffin, and then they would party for 3 days getting drunk.
That's probably true. I've heard something about that.
Well, she said that her great-grandmother on the second day started dancing with everyone else, got out of the coffin, was dancing with people.
No!
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, this is her family story. So, well, obviously they thought she was dead, but obviously she wasn't. So,
have you guys seen that? Well, it's not a joke, but this Irish man who used to prank everybody in life. had somebody put a recording of him in his casket when they were burying him, saying, "Let me out! I
just saw that recently.
Let me out!
I saw that recently. Yeah.
I'm not dead yet. Let me out!" And it was, I mean, oh my God! Talk about breaking up a sullen moment. This guy, right?
Well, they were all standing there laughing. But what if he really was saying that?
I'm sure somebody planted the recorder, and had.
Right.
But this guy must have been a life. He must have been one of the funniest people alive, because that was one of the best pranks I've ever seen. So.
Well, I mean,
the whole idea. What?
No, sorry. What you're saying, Rod?
Well, I was just going to say about the Premature Burial, the short story, which I found really not so much a story as just an essay on what it's like to be buried alive, and how he, and that is also that little snippet. Some of that dialogue, or not dialogue, but some of what's written, was used as dialogue in the movie. There's a brief moment when
that. I did, because I watched the movie twice. I loved that movie, by the way.
I saw that movie, not to make myself old, but I saw that when it came out.
You always say that.
I know, well, I did. I mean, I had a sister who worked at a movie theater, so, of course, Vincent Price, anything that had, of course, that had nothing to do with Vincent Price, but it was Edgar Allan Poe, and that was a biggie, and I do remember... That was Roger Corman.
Roger Corman directed this one?
Yes, he did.
I think that's what I was trying to recall. Sorry, continue.
Well, I'll tell you the history of that later, but I do know why Ray Milland was in there and not Vincent Price.
Yeah.
But what happened was when I read the Premature Burial as a story, I had already seen the movie. So I thought, well, what is this? I mean, it seemed like nothing like the movie whatsoever. It was just an essay of what it's like to be to wake up in your coffin and how you slowly become aware that the conqueror worm's in there and God knows what else is in there, and you're
gonna run out of air. That's gonna be
your lungs are on fire and it's dark. I mean, the darkness is like complete. There's nothing to break up the darkness, and it must be horrifying. It must be horrifying. I can't imagine.
All the way around.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, I mean, this was a big fear in the Victorians, because during this time
they did it all the time.
Well, they also put bells in people's coffins, didn't they, so they could ring?
Yeah.
And they would have people. They would have, and this is where the crypt keepers from. Where there would be a crypt keeper who watched overnight over in the cemeteries to listen for bells. That's what they did for their living. That's their job, in case someone should wake up. Now, I don't know how many people woke up and how many bells any of these people heard, because that story is. But I guess another quite interesting thing that maybe, which, you learn this in medical school and stuff like this, is that when they used to bury people anyway before they used the embalming, what happens that your brain basically is sending it, the electrodes in your brain are still going, and basically your pulses and everything are still kind of working, not your heartbeat pulse. But your electrical pulses are still going. So what happens is that your hair still grows and your nails still grow.
Really get the vampire theory.
Yeah, and basically what happens is that and your hands and feet do this energy. They
twitch. I've actually been at okay, going back to Italians. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm really not picking on your family, but we used to have. I don't know if you've ever been to back in the day when they had a wake. And you would have to kneel. We're Catholic, so you have to kneel and say a prayer. And I was like 9. I hated this shit, man, because I was terrified of dead people. And I remember one of my uncles started twitching in the casket, and I damn near pissed myself. And I was little.
Oh, God.
I refused to ever get on the kneeler ever again. I defied my mother openly, because sometimes, even if they're embalmed, they move.
Yeah, they do. Or they sit up and they...
Yes.
So, yeah, they do that. I've seen that happen before. Yeah,
literally shat myself. Seriously.
Well, it seemed like that was in House of Wax, where somebody sat up in a morgue, in a police morgue.
God.
Yeah,
but it's possible.
That actually happens before you do autopsies and stuff like that.
I've had friends that are in forensic sciences, and they've told me that they've come back in and they've seen them just sitting up. Just like, whoa, just like, fuck that job.
Oh, horrible.
And it catches you by surprise the first time. You're like, so you're kind of looking around. It's kind of like quite horrible.
On an episode of Creep Show.
Yeah. See, fact is more scary than fiction. Well, I have to say that in Ireland, they don't embalm in Ireland. It's still quite rustic Ireland. Well, this is like 1987 when I was living in Ireland, and the next door neighbor where I was living drowned. And I had no idea that they didn't embalm or anything like that because I come from America. I assume that every place is like America when it comes to everything.
Yeah.
And so I went there and went to pay my respects. And I walked in there and there's like horrible smell. It's like a waterlogged body because they don't embalm. So basically they sat the body. They basically just put the body into the caskets while it was waterlogged, and basically sat there for 3 days before they interred the body.
Oh, great!
And it was leaking. I was like, I sometimes I still close my eyes and I still envision this. I mean, I think I tell myself like, why I didn't even know this person really. I went there to pay respect because it was a nice thing to do because they were the next door neighbor. And ever since then, I thought to myself like, really? So. Because I can imagine it back in the day before embalming, there probably was a lot of horror stories going on.
Yeah, you mentioned that thing about the bell. Now, I never saw that cinematically until the movie The Nun. Did you see that movie?
Yes.
It's part of the Conjuring franchise. And
right.
They went to a cemetery, and a young lady, a novitiate nun, was with the priest or whatever, and she said, "What's the point? What's the reason for the bells on the tombstones?" And he explains it, and of course somebody ends up in the coffin and needs to use the bell. You could see that coming a mile away.
Right,
but
right.
I'd never seen that before. I mean, it's a great thing to have that, and they kind of work that into the premature burial thing, where he has this crypt with a coffin that is designed to open up and how it all turns into a nightmare.
Doesn't that coincide with the movie? They used the same. He's the one that came up with, not to bring the movie up yet, guys, but that he had this special outfitted kind of place where they were going to bury him, and he had all the bells and whistles, literally.
Yeah, and then it shows. Then when it supposedly really happens, which is just a nightmare, none of those things work. You remember? None of the things that he had rigged up worked for him. So he has to take some poison at the end, but the poison is turned into worms. I mean, that was pretty gross.
Yeah, no.
That's the scene I remember the most from that movie from when I was a kid, was that scene where he's about to drink a mug full of worms.
That's right. Oh, I forgot about that part. Yeah.
I mean, what's quite interesting is during Victorian times, they organized the Society for the Prevention of People Being Buried Alive. They had such strong concern about, because apparently there were hundreds of cases that were reported where doctors mistakenly pronounced people dead during this time period. So actually, it was quite this was kind of the norm. It wasn't like the odd thing; it was the norm.
Well, when you think about it, the methods that they used to determine death was putting a mirror up to your mouth, and that was like, okay, there's no condensation on it. They're dead. Hello, and that's where catatonic, trances come into play, and God knows what else. Where
what was that word he used that he said he was diagnosed with? What is it?
Catalepsy.
Catalepsy, which is basically where you're frozen, but your mind is awake. And nowadays we'd be able to determine that, but in those days they couldn't. I mean, it's scary. And then all of a sudden you come out.
Nowadays, I think there's a lot of people that suffer from catalepsy, but they're still moving.
Yes, they're still moving around. Oh, don't get me started on that.
They're still talking.
I'm not even going to mention it.
I'm not going to go there either. We all know.
Yeah, I think we do. I have a person in mind. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what I quite liked about this short story is I love the idea that he puts all this, what it seems like facts. So you're getting all this facts that he's throwing at you. But this is what's happened to this person, that person, so on and so forth.
That's why I was saying it was such an easy read for Edgar Allan Poe. Really?
Yeah. It was one of his easy modern English reads. Because remember, there's like two camps of Edgar Allan Poe. There's like if they're really rich, and then you kind of got this like Shakespearean kind of pacing that he puts through. But if they're like if they're a poor man, they're really done in common English. And I like the poor man stories sort of thing.
So do I.
Like Telltale Heart and things like that. And the Black Cat, I guess, is another one. But I find that But what I found was quite interesting. So then when we get into his story about his fears of being buried alive and his catalepsy and stuff like this, I found that really fascinating. And then at the very end, where basically he thinks he's buried alive and he's actually just in the bottom of a boat, because he's in the bottom of a boat and he hears someone say hush, that causes him to have a heart attack because of the fear. But he's not actually buried alive. And I thought that was a very clever approach. It actually take something that you think that, okay, I know the answer. And I was quite taken by surprise by that ending. I thought I was going to be buried alive because it's Poe. That's what happens. You just get buried alive.
I wonder, would Poe's works be labeled entertainment?
Well, he did put them in a host of magazines. I mean, reading was entertainment back then, so I'm assuming in some capacity.
I assume that too, but I mean, how entertaining is it to read about somebody slowly dying from being buried alive?
Well, people are morbid. Don't you think people are just morbid by nature? You know,
I think so. The black cat was horrible too. How he was obsessed with this cat and wanted to kill it and cut its eye out. I mean, it's just horrible stuff. But I have to
dark person.
But I have to say, during Victorian times, though, that basically, like, we covered. I mean, we actually learned this when Vicki and I covered The Turn of the Screw, which actually became the movie The Innocents. Right. And what we found out basically is that when they write these stories, they would release them around Christmas time. And what would happen is that on Christmas, part of their Christmas celebration was sit around and read a story like this for Christmas. And they would all get together by the fireplace, and daddy or mommy or whoever was illiterate in the house would basically read this to their kids before they went to bed. Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I knew the tradition, the British tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas. I do know. I kind of like that. Yeah, I kind of like that too.
Well, it explains A Christmas Carol, doesn't it? Because I mean, that's a ghost story, isn't it? And it's quite hideous, really. I mean, it does have a last unhappy ending.
Yeah, it is a ghost story. But the thing is, it doesn't really change Scrooge any. He's still going to die because everything human dies.
Yeah.
Because at the end, he's shown his tombstone. It's like, okay, here you're dead. Oh no, I'll change. Well, hey, you're an old man. You're like 80 years old now. How long do you think you have? But whatever. I
think with Scrooge, though, I think, to be honest, when you saw his tombstone, that wasn't it for me. I think when they were like stripping his body and selling all his stuff.
Yeah,
and the things they were saying, that's what always caught me.
They were saying nasty things. Like, oh. They were saying nasty things about him, then again,
they were talking trash about him while I was listening.
Right, everybody was, even the people at the stock exchange where he worked every day.
Well, he was such a bad person, though. He was just a mean, nasty old grout.
But you know what? Also, I found with the Christmas Carol, with that kind of story, is that after you die, is that, and then everything that you like collected is actually worth nothing to anyone. They just throw it away. I always find, and I think that's what whenever I see A Christmas Carol or read it, that's what I always think. It's like, God, when I die, what am I going to do with all my shit? I always think it's like, when you die, what happens to your pets? That's what I worry about.
Exactly.
He didn't have any pets. But he lived in a cavernous house. I mean, we're talking the Alistair Sims version, right? That's the one I always think of. He lived in a cavernous house, so and all he had was a housekeeper that he treated like crap. Yeah. And but in the end, he has reclamation. Oh, there's something I want to throw out to you about Turn of the Screw. All right, now correct me if I'm wrong, but Miss Jessel comes there as a governess to those two children, and previously there had been another governess there who had an illicit affair with Quint. Right. And according to Mrs. Gross, the housekeeper, they used rooms, at least this is a line from The Innocents, they used rooms as if they were dark forests. In other words, they were having sex in front of the children. Basically. So now she's afraid that the children are being possessed by Quint and Miss Jessel, but if they are, and they're being possessed, what does that mean as far as their relationship is concerned? Are they brother and sister anymore, or are they
to be honest, lovers? Because the story is told from like her point of view, most of it. We kind of got an unreliable narrator because she's a bit unhinged.
Yeah, she's a little
because she came there first. Something happened in her previous employ before she even went there. So obviously, and they don't really tell you. They keep hinting around. It's like, classic Henry James is like, try to figure out what happened here. It doesn't really tell you.
That's interesting. I didn't know this.
Yeah, so in the story herself, she kind of goes there, but she was somewhere else, and basically something went wrong where she was the nanny for someone else before she actually came here and did this. And then again, and basically it is Henry James, so it's probably just repressed sexuality anyway with his characters.
Yeah, typical Victorian stuff.
In the Deborah Carr version, they make it clear that that's her first time to go to be a nanny. A granny, I almost said, a nanny. And the thing is that she was pretty close to 40, who had lived in a house where her father was a reverend. And you imagine that it was pretty repressed, at that point. Spinster, an attractive spinster, but a spinster nonetheless. And she very quickly gets this into her head about the kids being possessed. But I think another thing,
I guess also is, another thing is like, we're also talking about a housekeeper who loved to gossip anyway. So what she might be telling her might not actually be the truth.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
they might not always, because what housekeepers and all Victorian things are always very gossipy, isn't it? It's kind of like kind of a trope. So.
Well, we went off on a little tangent, but it was a literary one.
Well, it was kind of along the lines where we needed to be, Rod. We only expect that out of you when you get on our podcast.
At least we're still in the Victorian era.
That's right. Why break with tradition?
Though I do worry that if we ever cover Nosferatu, whether you've seen that on its premiere.
No, that I did not see. I mean, I would say anything from 1957 on, I did see at the movies. Mm-hmm. That goes far back. I mean, that's 63 years ago now, right? Okay, so that goes far back. I have seen. I mean, my first movie I ever saw that was a horror film was called From Hell It Came, and I was 6 when my sister brought me to see that. She's the one who brought me to see all those movies. She brought me to see all of those. I've seen all the William Castles, all the Edgar Allan Poes, all the Hammers that came this way. I grew to love all of them. But the era ended. The era ended around the very end of the 60s, very early 70s, I'd say. That's when it ended.
It became a bit more lurid then, didn't it, after that?
Yes, it did. After Night of the Living Dead, that changed everything, was that movie.
It did.
Yeah, I like the movie, but I find it very slow to watch, to sit through. But at the time when I first saw it, I thought it was great. Mm-hmm. But when you're used to the sumptuous trappings of Edgar Allan Poe, or a Christopher Lee Dracula film, for example, or Peter Cushing Dr. Frankenstein film, a movie like Night of the Living Dead that takes place in an old abandoned farmhouse and everybody's wearing normal clothes and it's in black and white, it's pretty stark, the difference between the two. And it's funny that the Hammers weren't able to survive.
I'm just trying to figure out where doctors' mentalities were, because they're saying like hundreds of cases have been reported where doctors mistakenly pronounced people dead back then. So this was probably a real serious fear for people. But I mean, where were these doctors getting educated at that they could have even gone?
Well, to be honest, if people were in comas in those days, I mean, nowadays, we have,
brainwave stuff and everything.
Yeah, we have sonograms and EKGs and ECGs and so on and so forth, and and that basically anytime there's no life, we get the beep, but until that we just get beep beep beep, so we kind of know that this person's still got vitals. And I guess in those days, basically you just kind of had to listen. And I mean, and to be honest, some people who do go into a coma are basically very shallow breathing, and their heartbeat's very, very faint, and so on and so forth.
Really, it was an issue.
And I can imagine stethoscopes probably weren't the same as what we have nowadays either. So
they probably weren't.
No, I've seen them use it. It's like a little wooden thing that they put against the chest, and they put their ear to it. It looks like a glass turned upside down, and that's basically what they used for the stethoscope. and they tested the pulse, and they listened to the heartbeat with their own ear, put to the chest, and they did the thing with a mirror.
Yeah.
But I would assume that after a while they stiffened up, didn't they? I mean, isn't that what happens?
Rigor mortis, yeah.
Yeah, rigor mortis. I couldn't think of the term, rigor mortis.
Well, if you're in a coma for a length of time anyway, if you don't exercise the muscle tone, that they do become stiff anyway.
Yeah, they have to give you therapy.
Yeah, because that's what they do now when you're in a coma. I mean, they've been doing it for a number of years. But if you are in a coma, they keep your limbs going and they massage your limbs. But back in the day, they probably didn't. They probably just let you lay there and just. So it probably would show bed sores and rigor mortis and so on and so forth back in the day. So.
God.
One interesting thing about Premature Burial, the Dark Shadows did cover the Premature Burial as well as part of its narrative.
Oh yes.
And Telltale Heart
in
the cast and the Pendulum and subsequent other movies. So
maybe it was a Corman thing.
It was I think it was because Corman brought it back, and it was the whole premise of the movie, and the movie was I would assume a moderate hit, I wouldn't really call it a horror film, though.
I don't know. Getting Buried Alive is pretty horrific to me.
Yeah, but
I think it's one of those things. Is how you view it, and you view it as yourself in that position. It's quite horrific.
Psychological thriller.
But I guess if you watch it with no empathy, I guess it's not a horror film. I guess.
I got to hand it to actors and actresses who, in films, actually have to get inside a coffin, and close the lid on them. I mean, that's like Jonathan Frid had that happen all the time. He's always opening the coffins on Dark Shadows, and he's in the coffin. So, but the coffin wasn't very deep. I did notice that. Yeah, the coffin wasn't deep. It was like he was lying on top of the coffin almost when they opened up the thing. But I remember reading Catherine Lee Scott had to get into a coffin, and she really hated it. She didn't like it at all.
I'm really claustrophobic. I don't like that stuff at all. I don't like it at all. That's why I tell my kids, please cremate me, because I do not want to be in box. They're going, Mom, I don't know about it. And I go, yes, I will. They go, don't put me in a box. So
right.
Well, now they can cremate you and take your ashes and turn you into jewelry now.
Yeah, I know. Send me out like a Viking.
Oh, God, turn you into jewelry.
Well, there's something weird about that. Well,
I'm going to turn you into a brooch and wear it. This is Vicky.
Well, they've got these cool things like these glass globes now, that you can put some of your, family's ash in, and they're really quite pretty, but I don't know.
Well, my stepfather, when my mom died, got my mom's ashes and put them in all these little vials so we can each have a vial of my mom's ashes. Like, nah, no, thank you. It's nice. Thank you for the thought. None of us can. So she's just basically still on the television set in these little vials.
I know. Is that? I wouldn't want that to happen to me, but my mother. Yeah. I still have her ashes, and my older sister, I have her ashes. She wanted them to be dispersed at a gunquit, which is on the coast of Maine, and I haven't done it yet. I'd have to actually drive down there and do it, and I haven't done it. So they're sitting in a box in the closet.
I want to be cremated and flushed down the toilet, because I think that's probably.
God! At least you'll be for the
pretty much describes my whole life right there, doesn't it? One single statement.
Flush, and then it gets stuck. It's too much. I mean, I was surprised at how much ashes there were.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what do they burn besides just the body? Is it the clothing? Are they wearing clothes?
What they do is there's a box for modesty that they put you in. It's a cardboard box, and they attach a metal tag, and that's pretty much all you got going in.
Are you wearing your clothes though?
No.
Or your nudies?
No, they don't put your clothes on.
Okay.
Well,
anything you want interred with that person or burned with them, they will like the lock. Somebody cut off a lock of my hair to put in with my son, and it's stuff like that. But they do they tell you before they're going to do it. They give you a cardboard box for modesty, and I don't understand that. But
they'll inter other things with you then, right?
You can have anything put in there.
Friends, like friends.
I don't know about
like a pet.
I want my friends with me.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's going to happen, Keith.
Well, I've had my pet. Well, what about a cremated pet? You could have that.
Probably. I think you could with anything within reason. Yeah. Keith is not within reason.
I had my cat cremated, and that's the first animal I ever had that done to, of my own. And he was my little soulmate, this kitty. I mean, he's been dead 4 years this month, June 10th, and he was my absolute soulmate. I love that kitty to death. And I have another cat. They're Siamese. I have another Siamese who I also love, but it's a different cat. It's a different love than I had with him. I mean, this cat was he followed me everywhere. Wouldn't leave me alone for a moment. And I had adopted him, and he was already 3 at that point. Well, anyway, we got to talk about Premature Burial. Premature Burial. It's light reading, and the kind of thing that makes you think. It makes you think, and it makes you glad that you're not living in Victorian time.
No kidding.
Yeah, but it does make you think about, if that really did happen to people, and I believe that it did, and they died horribly.
Well, it's got to be a horrible way. Wake up in a casket, and you find you don't really, I don't know, you get your sense about you, and you realize this ain't cool. That's got to be an awful way to go. Just awful.
Yeah, it's got to be.
If I was in Victorian times, that's probably what would happen to me, because my life is like that. That would just happen to me. Anything bad's like, everything bad happens to me. It's like, right, lovely. So, well, that brings us to the end of the what?
Oh, go ahead.
So that brings us to the end of The Premature Burial by Edgar Allan Poe. Now we're moving to The Premature Burial, the film, which is a 1962 American International Picture horror film directed by Roger Corman, starring Ray Milland, also with Hazel Court, last seen when we did Mask of the Red Death.
Yep.
Alan Napier, Heather Angel, and Richard Ney, with screenplay by Charles Beaumont and Ray Russell. It was based upon the 1844 short story of the same name by Edgar Allan Poe. It was the third in a series of 8 Poe-themed pictures known informally as the Poe Cycle, directed by Corman for American International. And before we discuss this film, we're going to cut to the trailer and a special book option that you can buy with a special price from Story Geek.
Sorry for the brief interruption, but I wanted to give you a gift. This is Jay Shear, author of the Amazon top-selling time travel novel Time Slingers and co-host of the Story Geeks podcast. We just released the Kindle edition of Death of a Bounty Hunter, our new supernatural steampunk Western novel, and I'd love for you to have it. With so many of us staying at home, we wanted to give you something. So we released the book early and discounted it to just 99 cents. You can learn more at deathofabountyhunter.com, but here's Mockingbird Preacher Witch, a character from the novel, to tell you what it's about.
This isn't a story about the man-ogre with a Gatling gun for an arm, or the Taiwan sorceress covered in tattoos, or even the long-winded banker. And while the speedster idiot and the large, very funny Pinkerton detective lady do play a role, it's not about them either. You might think this tale is about the Sheriff of Jericho, a man who will do just about anything to save a loved one, including work for a secret occultish society. And then there's a woman who bears the brunt of his sins and must defend herself when she's most vulnerable. All those characters appear in the story. I do too. But it's about more than that. The one I was assigned to, the Korean bounty hunter, he's at the dead center of it all. Flint, a bounty hunter who comes face to face with something we all do. Guilt and shame. And the desire to run from them. Not because we're cowards, but because sometimes we just can't stand ourselves. It's a story about that. The Gatling guns, the occult, the paranormal, and even the demon spawn, all those are just along for the ride. Mockingbird Preacher Witch. Like I said, I'm in the story. Just read it.
Mockingbird Preacher Witch is voiced by Anastasia Washington in the full cast audiobook coming out later this summer. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this gift from us to you while you stay at home. To get the Kindle edition for just 99 cents, visit deathofabountyhunter.com. That's deathofabountyhunter.com.
just the two of us. Together.
A woman possessed by love. A man obsessed by terror. Only Edgar Allan Poe, who knew intimately the tortures of madness, could create such ever-increasing suspense. Only an artist of unique talent and unusual sensitivity could live so demanding a role, believing he is destined to be buried alive. No matter who he destroyed, no matter how desperately he fought, his life became a nightmare of death.
No! You're dead! No.
Until reality and madness became one.
If his father was prematurely interred.
I heard his voice.
All right, then prove it.
I will.
You are about to enjoy an experience in extreme terror.
I'm alive. Can't you hear me? I'm alive, alive, alive. Someone help me.
Hello, welcome back to Literary Relations Podcast, and we're discussing The Premature Burial, the 1962 film. So, Rod, what are your thoughts of The Premature Burial?
I absolutely love this film. I love the look of the movie. I didn't find it scary, per se, but it was a very involving mystery, I would say, more than anything else. Instead of Vincent Price, who up until that point had already made a few of the Poe movies, we had Ray Milland, and Ray Milland was a big star, not somebody normally associated with horror films, although he made his fair share of them when he got older, and even around that period. He did Panic in Year Zero, and he did Man with the X-Ray Eyes, which all those movies are great.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed, there's little things that I've come to enjoy even more as I've watched become more educated on his filmography, meaning Ray Milland's, and Alan Napier, who plays, I can't remember what he played in this
Dr.
movie.
Gideon Cole?
Was it his father-in-law? No,
the doctor.
I can't. Yeah, he was the doctor.
Wife's father, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was his wife's father, but he is was also in The Uninvited with Ray Milland in 1944, and plays the doctor in that movie as well. And they do a seance together, and with Ruth Huzzy and Gail Russell was in that movie as well. And he also played Alfred on Batman, so that was where Baby Boomers.
That's why I recognize him.
I know, it was driving me crazy. I couldn't figure out where I'd seen this guy before.
Yeah, he was older, of course, when he was Alfred, but it's the same actor. And that's what Baby Boomers will always remember him for, that, all his movies. But I really enjoyed the inclusion of Ray Milland. He brought a seriousness, because it's not that Price couldn't be serious, but there was a theatrical quality to Price that didn't always fit.
Right.
The swooning, the tortured looks. You didn't see any of this on Ray Milland. Ray Milland played it straight all the way through, and I really enjoyed that. And it was very colorful and a sumptuous-looking movie. I always wondered what the budgets were on movies like that.
They had lots of smoke. About the whole movie, it was foggy.
Yeah,
what I like is but everything looked like it was. You could tell that everything was done on a soundstage, but it kind of added to it. Actually,
it did.
It kind of like made you think of like American Playhouse or something like that. The American Playhouse presents Edgar Allan Poe, and it kind of reminded me of that, everything was done on a stage, and I quite liked that sort of thing, because it gave, like, even like when they're like walking through the trees and you kind of see like the blank background behind him, because it's, you know, it's Roger Corman, and Roger Corman made films on the cheap, as we all know, and obviously he didn't want to paint, you know, he didn't have enough money to paint like a background scenery, you know. So basically, he's like, you just have like a blank screen, and they're kind of walking through the trees with the coffin. And it's like,
at the beginning of the, well, when they first go to the at the very beginning before the title card, it's like that. It's set bound, but there's a mystery to it, like you said, a fairy tale quality to it, where you know that this isn't real. You know, you just know it's not real, but it makes it adds to the overall ambiance of the movie. I thought these actors really gave these things their all. Now Heather Angel, I don't know, she sounded awfully familiar to me, and she looked familiar, but I didn't look her up to see what she's done. What was she in? Does anybody know?
Which actress?
Heather Angel.
Was she in How Green Was My Valley? Was she one of those John Ford stars that?
Heather
Angel. John Ford always had like a little stock company. Barry Fitzgerald was usually in it, and his brother Arthur Shields was usually in it in the background. And sometimes he'd use a woman like.
He was in Family Affair in Peyton Place.
Family Affair, the TV show.
There's TV shows. Heather Angel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She must have been Mr. French's girlfriend.
Let me see. What else did she?
Yeah, Mr. French was a butler, so I bet she was a nanny.
She did She did quite a few movies, actually. Berkeley Square, Arrest Bulldog Drummond,
Down to the Baskervilles.
Yeah, I often confuse her with I can't remember her name. The actress who was in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane as the nosy neighbor.
She was in Lifeboat, and with
she was in
Hitchcock's Lifeboat. Yeah, she's the nurse in Lifeboat. Remember the nurse and her two little...
the young girl that was on the boat. That was her.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because there was only two women on there. There was Tallulah and her. Oh, that's interesting.
She was the voice of Wendy in Peter Pan, Disney's Peter Pan.
Oh my word! Okay, well that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So who was the actress in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? And she was also in Bedlam with Boris Karloff. She gets thrown into Bedlam by Karloff because he doesn't like her. What the heck was her name?
Oh God, I'm drawing a blank, and I know who you're talking about.
I'm drawing a blank as well.
She was in several John Ford movies as well, always in the background. She was in How Green Was My Valley, which is one of my favorite John Ford movies. Here we are discussing John Ford and Roger Corman in the same breath.
Well, you know, saying that, the assistant director of this film is Frances Ford Coppola.
What film?
Frances Ford Coppola is the assistant director on this film.
Oh,
he started
really?
out with Roger Corman, so this is one of his films that he worked on Roger Corman with.
You aren't trying to talk about Betty Davis, are you?
No, Betty Davis would I know who Betty.
You're talking about the next door neighbor, the woman who lived next door to them.
Yeah. Okay. What was her name? You'd have to look up Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and her name is Mrs. Bates. Mrs. Bates is her name.
Let me see. It isn't Anna Lee, is it? Yes, it is Anna Lee.
Anna Lee, yes, that's the one. I confuse her with Heather Angel. But she ends up killing Ray Milland at the end. Ray Milland is insane. I guess the whole experience of being buried alive.
Right. Did you think with this movie, I watched it twice because I was trying to do you think the wife was a sincere person or she was setting him up?
Oh, setting him up. Oh, yeah. She knew all about it.
Because they didn't really come right out and say it. He just went batshit on her in the end and threw her in the ground.
Well, for one thing, he was being buried in the ground. Okay, now he knew that he had already arranged this tomb, this elaborate tomb, and they weren't burying him there.
But he blew it up, remember?
Oh, he did blow it up. That's right.
Because she said, "Why don't you choose life instead of death and live life with me?" And so he destroyed that.
He blew it up in a very stage-bound way. I remember it looked like it was done inside a building. I don't know, with a big sky overhead.
Well, you still had the smog on the ground. You know, they had lots of dry ice going.
I have to say that Hazel Court is beautiful, though.
Yes, Hazel Court is very lovely. And
very beautiful.
When I first saw this movie, I asked my sister, I said, what is that dirt that they're throwing at? Because it went right in her mouth at one point when she's in the grave. And she said, oh, it's probably cocoa. I remember her telling me that. I mean, what do you think it was?
That they were throwing on her?
Yeah, it looked like dirt, but I mean, it went right in her mouth while she's screaming.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't know. I can't picture Roger Corman spending money. He's a bit like Dan Curtis. I can't picture him spending money on cocoa to throw in someone's face. He's like, let's get some dirt from outside in the garden there.
So you think so? You think maybe she just said, "The hell with it, I'll take it." Like, take one for the team, and she'd probably eat dirt.
Yeah, she probably did. She probably did do something realistically like that, because I'm sure they wanted to. I mean, they had to dump her in the grave first of all, because he ties her up and then he flips her. So she falls into the grave. She could have ended up lying on her stomach, but for some reason she ended up on her back, that's why she got the dirt in the face.
That was for the best effect, probably.
But I really enjoyed it. I really, I
love it.
That set me on a Ray Milland kick. So I began looking at a lot of Ray Milland. I was more fascinated by why a star like Ray Milland, who had been a leading man in Hollywood for God knows how long, as a light comedian and a dramatic actor, and had won an Oscar and all that stuff, what the heck was he doing in a horror film?
He probably wanted to try something different. I mean, after a while, you get pigeonholed into the bad guy, whatever. It was a great script, I thought. I thought it was.
Yeah, Charles Beaumont's a great script writer. He wrote a lot of the Twilight Zones, and Charles Beaumont also written quite a few things. I think the last thing that he did was he wrote a musical with Alan Menken from Little Shop of Horrors and Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, so on and so forth, called Weird Romance. And really good script for that as well. I mean, he's very talented, and he does, and every line means something with the Charles Beaumont script as well. So maybe he was drawn by the excellence of the script itself. And to be honest, it gave Ray Milland a really good tour de force to work with. It played on every single one of his characteristics, where he could be like kind and scared, and he can all these phobias and how everything.
Yes.
He was able to show a lot of different facets of his acting career in this film.
He probably just wanted something different,
But he probably was older as well, so he probably wasn't getting the roles he used to get as well.
That's true too, sadly.
It's probably you had to do Roger Corman or television. In those days, television was the kiss of death, wasn't it? So it's kind of
it's still kind of.
Well, he did do a lot of TV. He did an Alfred Hitchcock hour around that time, where he was a head of a mental asylum, but in reality, he was the crazy one. He had already broken out.
I think a lot of movie actors did Alfred Hitchcock. Probably they thought, well, if I do this TV, he might put me in a movie. So I think that's probably the reason why Alfred Hitchcock got some of the cast people that he got.
Yeah.
He got a lot of really good people in those Alfred Hitchcock's shows. So I also like the fact that Dick Miller's in this as well, who's a staple of Roger Corman films. So,
well, he played Moe or Sweeney and Moe. I think those were the two names of the other gravedigger was a familiar Corman face as well.
What was the tune that he was whistling? That kind of stuck in my head.
Allen. Wasn't it Barbara Allen? Was that the name of the tune?
Oh God, that's driving me nuts now because it's stuck in my head. I was whistling it.
Yeah.
Yes, that one.
Yeah, that's it. And
it's a catchy little tune, don't you think?
Well, it's a traditional tune, so he didn't have to pay any royalties.
That too.
And the music was done by Ronald Stein.
Yeah, and Les Baxter as well.
Oh, Les Baxter. I don't really like his music, to be honest with you. He did a lot of the beach party stuff too, and I really didn't like it. But I did like Ronald Stein. He's the one who did the score to Mask of the Red Death, which I thought, and Haunted Palace, which I thought was very, very, No, I thought they were great. They were majestic. I mean, considering that what's the audience for this movie? What's the audience for Mask of the Red Death back in the day? Probably 12-year-old boys and girls.
Right.
And mostly probably boys more than anything else. So So
I had a couple of tomboys thrown in the mix. I probably would have watched all them.
Right. Well, I would say that they were made for a young matinee audience, and they got their literary thing on. It was literary light, but at least it made people want to read Edgar Allan Poe. And I think that's what happened.
I know one thing, and I watched this movie. My husband watched it with me, and it set him off on a Ray Milland kick. We had to watch The Man with the X-Ray Eyes and everything else. We went on a Ray Milland-a-thon.
Oh, that's a great movie, too. Man with the X-Ray Eyes is a really good movie. I mean, if it had a better budget, it's a classic, but it would be a superior classic.
It could have been.
Have you seen it, Keith? Have you seen it?
No. It's on my list to see. I haven't gotten around to it.
You really like it. It's science fiction. It's science fiction, but it's just a man who experiments on his eyes with fluid, and he ends up seeing the center of the universe, or whatever it is that's out there.
Or through women's clothing. That was my favorite part.
Yeah, that was the first thing, yes. Even though he went to a party and everybody was dancing naked, they were doing the twist, and he was doing the most awkward-looking twist I've ever seen. It looked like Donald Trump doing the twist. That's what it looked like. Just standing there, moving his hips a little bit. Like a robot.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that, I have to admit. I couldn't do the twist either, though, to tell you the truth.
Oh, that was an easy one.
I could do a twist.
That was one of the easier ones.
Yeah, throw my back out now, though.
I can twist, shimmy, pony, the mashed potato.
The pony, mashed potato, yeah. Although I couldn't do those. That was very difficult. The mashed potato.
I don't have any rhythm. I just don't. I can't even slow dance worth of shit. So I'm just a lost cause when it comes to dancing.
I can even do the Madison.
The Madison. Now, what was the Madison in? That was in some movie. Was that Hairspray?
Yeah, Hairspray.
Okay. When did they do the Madison?
When Tracy Turnblad first shows up and she joins the dance of the TV series.
Okay, they do the Madison. That's right.
They do the Madison.
How funny.
The Freddie. They did the Freddie on the Addams Family show.
Yeah.
John Astin doing the Freddie. I mean, that was 100 years ago. The Freddie. The Watusi. That's where it started getting difficult. Was the Watusi
and the bug? I can do the bug. Squish.
The bug? I don't know the bug.
Squish. Squash.
What's that? You're stamping out a bug. You're stomping out a bug, and that's
so you basically it's like you stamp your foot down and you like twist and you on your balls of your feet one and you're squishing the dog and then you jump to the other one and you squish the other one while you come doing this twisty thing.
A dance about squishing bugs. What a wonderful thing.
Well, my mom taught me all these,
I love it. That's right. You're a youngster.
The hook-a-book.
Well, if you try to get into the boogie woogie and stuff like that from the 40s, that's where you really get a workout.
Yeah.
Right.
You've seen some of those in movies. That's amazing to watch.
Right. My mom
swing
taught me
dancing, that's the one. Swing.
Yeah, my mom taught me swing dancing and jitterbugging and,
what about the Charleston? That's a good one, too, if you can see somebody really doing it good.
I used to be able to.
I used to jitterbug with my sister and got to the point where I would like throw her over my back and then lift her up in the air and over one side and up and down the other side.
Wow. That's where you get your exercise.
Oh, Keith was pretty good at that stuff back in the day.
Back in the day, before I became an old man.
Back in the day when I was a youngster, I watched Shadows.
Back when I used to go to school barefoot through the snow and walk there 9 miles, 9 miles back.
That's not such a lie, though. It's not a lie.
50 miles in bare feet. And when we got there, you had to run around in order to warm up because the stove was cold in your one-room schoolhouse.
Well, you know what's going to happen, like this generation, to digress slightly, but like this generation are like teenagers, and when they become grandparents, they're going to tell the grandchildren, COVID, you should have been alive then. People were dead in the street. They're dead everywhere. We had to step over bodies just to get to the grocery store while wearing masks.
Right. It's bad enough people talk about, remember when we first had cell phones and they were the size of a lunchbox or whatever? I mean... It's kind of funny when you see those in movies when they pull out a phone like that. It's
it kind of resonates with you, doesn't it?
Well, I have to say that you can always age a movie between the 90s and now by the cell phone that they're using.
They usually have
the
like
bigger
a little
ones
antenna.
with the antenna on them.
Yeah, the antenna, even the small ones with the antenna on them.
Yeah.
Or the small one, like the little flip thing, like in
the
like
flip
Star
thing
Trek.
And texting. Remember when texting was 25 cents a text?
Yeah. And it's kind of funny that you mentioned Star Trek because it almost is like he's got a cell phone.
Yeah.
He flips it, and it's kind of weird. Anyway.
Well, they also had like that flip thing anyway. I mean, at one point, I think, God, this has to be about, what is it, 1990 something, that basically Nokia or one of those did do a flip thing, didn't it, where we had to like flip it and like talk to it, like, and you had to flip it closed like a Star Trek phone. Star Trek communicator.
I always used to break my screens like that. But I don't know, this movie, I thought it was beautifully done. I liked
it was beautiful.
But it was really creepy. You guys are probably right. It was probably done on a soundstage because, I mean, they used a lot of dry ice. There was like dry ice throughout the whole movie.
Oh yeah.
Or whatever you're making your smoke.
Probably most of the
I'm always amazed at these Edgar Allan Poe movies where nobody is. I mean, in this movie, he was buried out in the cemetery, but most everybody gets buried in the basement. I don't know why that is. You just want to have your dead relatives in your basement.
Well, I think historically, back in the day, I don't know about so much around this period of time, but there were people that buried, they're like they were like catacombs, mini catacombs.
Yeah,
I've been in houses like that, and it's fascinating that there's people still there. But then you had the mausoleums, and that came. Mausoleum is the way to go.
To be honest, I don't know if I'd want my mom and dad buried underneath my floor.
I'm paranoid and I'm weird, and I don't want no dead people in my house.
I mean, it's bad enough that my mom died in upstate New York. I am living in London, and I feel like before, I never used to be paranoid. I used to do it my life, and I think I'll just lie to her. She won't know any difference. Now I feel like she knows everything I'm up to, so I'm just really paranoid all the time.
Oh, of course.
It's like she just see me doing whatever.
Yeah. She sees you doing whatever, no matter what you want to hide from her. She's going to find out. That's the way it goes. But I really did think the movie was beautiful, and I was taken by, in these Poe movies, by the furnishings of the rooms and how grand they look, considering what AIP used to produce, and the costumes. Like, she's in a wedding gown at one point, which was absolutely stunning. She had the figure for it anyway. She had a, not today's kind of figure, but more of a, Zaftig, is that what they call it? Zaftig figure. And she was beautiful, and they drink the wine out of the glasses, but the thing is, when I saw these movies, they were re-released in 1967 on a triple and even a 5 movie, not double bill, but matinee or whatever, or at a drive-in. You'd see like 5 Edgar Allan Poe movies all at once, or one right after another, and you began noticing that all the candles were red, and all the glassware was the same glassware in every movie.
Well, wasn't it?
That's red true. Goblets.
That's true.
Well, I mean, we covered, what movie did we do last month, the Edgar Allan Poe movie? And the fire that was in that was, they used the same fire that they used in...
It must have been Tales of Terror, because I missed that.
Yeah, it was Tales of Terror.
Yeah, that was it.
Oh, that's right. You blew us off last month, Rob.
Yeah, I didn't. I forgot about it. I wanted to... M. Valdemar especially. But, I didn't like the Black Cat.
Because your life is so busy in lockdown.
I know. Well... It is actually busy. I got to take care of my cats, and that's a 24/7 duty. I had a bat in my house last night. Well, yesterday afternoon, actually. I'm chasing this bat around with a tennis racket. I didn't want to kill it. I just wanted to stun it, and I couldn't. It's still in here somewhere. I don't know where it went.
You're living life on the edge, Rod.
I know. I've dealt with bats since I've lived in this house, going all the way back to the late 60s. There's always a bat at least once.
You're probably
I don't know why that is.
So your life is basically like the opening segment of Scooby-Doo. Where are you?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Chasing. I don't see rats and bugs and stuff like that, but I do see an occasional. And my concern is I don't want them to bite me, and I don't want my cats to go after them. That's the thing. When a cat sees something flying around, they're very interested in it.
Oh, yeah.
Although my Siamese just sat on the bed and just
my
watched
cat's
it.
very interested in killing things at the moment. Isaac came downstairs, and there was a dead squirrel at the foot of the stairs.
Oh my God, he brought in a squirrel?
A dead one. He killed one. And
My
then
cat does that. God, I hate it when they bring stuff in the house.
And then he goes out, and then the next day Isaac goes out to the back garden, and there's another dead squirrel there. So he's killing squirrels again. So.
Huh. Anyway, another character I wanted to discuss, or actor, was Richard Nye, or Nye. Is it Nye?
Mm-hmm.
He was in
memory what Nye did. I'm trying to remember where's his place in here. What did he do?
Well, he was the hero, I guess you could call it at the
Archer.
end. Yeah, he was the hero. What I remember him from was he played Greer Garson's son in Mrs. Miniver, way in the 40s, and ended up marrying her in real life. So she played his mother, and he ended up marrying her. She was like 6 years older than him. And they had a very acrimonious relationship. And then later on, he was on a classic Outer Limits episode, and where he plays an alien who has gills in his neck. I don't know if you remember that episode. I can't remember what the name of it was. It had something to do with a boy. Actually. Yeah, they had chosen a boy to bring to some planet, and the boy ends up killing him in the end because he's trying to kill the father, trying to make him jump out of a window.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, Richard Nye. And then I guess he became a stockbroker and did very well at it in his life.
You know what I also liked about this film as well is that everyone seems age appropriate. Like Ray Milland's sister seems around the same age as Ray Milland.
Yeah.
And that's what I quite like, because normally what you get is like Vincent Price, who looks about 50, and then you get like the sister showing up and she's like teenager or early 20s, and it was always kind of like a thing.
Yeah.
So,
right.
And I see this movie does seem everyone was kind of like age appropriate. It seems like everyone was wrong.
Yeah, that's a good observation considering you're right.
Because normally you get like some old geezer and all the women are quite really young. And I mean, Hazel.
That's sort of like the news anchor mentality equivalent, because you always got the beautiful woman, the young woman that's doing this part of the news. Then you got the old geezer over here, because they do this in Dallas all the time. It's some kind of, what do you call it, formula that they have to draw in, I guess.
Well, I mean, look at Dark Shadows, Burke Devlin dating the young girls, and that was kind of like ew. But
yeah, that was
even
odd.
Hazel, but even Hazel Court, I mean, she's a mature woman. She's very stunning, but at least she's around the right age. She's not.
I always thought she was about 35 myself. Maybe that's aging her too much, but I always thought she was about
she's very mature looking, though, isn't she? She's kind of like. You know, she could be like 28, 29 for all I know, but she just has a very mature way of carrying herself.
Right. And plus she was an established actress. I mean, we knew who she was. She wasn't just some person that they dragged in. And that's another thing, too, that I noticed. If you go all the way back to Fall of the House of Usher, there's just four people in the entire movie. And one of them is the butler, who plays a very small part.
Yeah.
So then the cast started increasing. Have you noticed? I mean, you look at all the people that are in Premature Burial. There's quite a few. Yeah. They all had to negotiate contracts. They all had to get paid. So there must have been money in the till. There must have been.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Was it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10?
10. Does that include Alan Napier?
Yeah. And Brandon Dillon is the clergyman who had a minute part.
Okay, and Moe and Sweeney and all that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, those people all had to get paid. Think about it. And I would assume that Milland got the majority of the money. I mean, got the best
he was
money.
He was the big, draw-in, probably.
Well, I mean, they said in the trailer, don't they say, starring Academy Award winner Ray Milland?
So.
Okay, I can see that.
There doesn't seem to be how much they actually spent. It does say the movie did make $1 million in France alone. So
really?
Yeah.
But you normally kind of have like somewhere where you can find how much the movie cost to make, but there's nothing here.
Yeah, they're not saying too much about this one.
I mean, this kind of seems like the Forgotten Poe movie as well, though, isn't it? As far as all the Vincent Price ones are like released on Blu-ray, they cleaned them up and everything like this, and this one's kind of like still, the picture's still good, but you could tell that they haven't really spent a lot of work on, bringing it up to make it.
Look really? I didn't know that. Is it on Blu-ray?
No, it's not. They might do eventually, but I mean, they've done all. when you think of the Corman Poe film, this hardly ever gets mentioned, which is kind of bizarre because, to be honest, this film is probably a bit outside of the Mask of the Red Death, which is, I think, is like the pinnacle of that whole.
Yes, I agree.
The whole cycle. But I think this one's like a very close second to that. As far as, I actually enjoyed this. I didn't feel. It just felt more realistic in its approach. It didn't feel.
I watched it twice. I loved it.
Yeah.
I just, because I was missing, so I watched it again because I was trying to figure out how much the wife was doing to him. And was she actually screwing with his head the whole time, like the kitten in the wall and stuff like that? I mean, what was her point of wanting to get rid of him is what I was trying to figure out.
Money. She wanted money, and she.
Yeah, it's always money.
I would assume she was in love with Miles, but I don't think Miles was in on it. That's what I think.
Well, he was kind of giving her looks. They were looking,
Right, they were looking, but the sister definitely suspected her.
Yeah, the
never really.
Shit.
Yeah, and once the key to the crypt was missing, or the downstairs crypt, I can't remember exactly what happened. Wait a minute, did they notice that it was missing?
So, yeah, he wanted to go down there and open the father's crypt because he said, we need to open up the crypt. If you said you heard your father screaming and you thought that he was buried alive, then we need to go down there and look. Because the key was gone, because then he had to take the crowbar and pry the door open, and whatever fell on him.
Right. It was a skeleton with a wig on his head. What?
I have to sit there and say that out of all the Poe films, this is probably the one that's the closest to the story as well.
Yeah, they did have the same. There was dialogue from the story that they had transferred into the script. Where he's and then there's also the crypt that he made that he eventually blew up for his wife. So I mean, they did kind of.
And he dies at the end.
From it.
Well, so.
Yes, it was about a man's obsession with premature burial. That, just like the story, there was a dramatic story written around it of revenge and conspiring to get rid of somebody for money or for whatever reason. I assume it was money. That's what I think.
Well, he was rich, wasn't he? I mean, if I had a fancy tomb like that, I would say I had money to burn.
Yeah, he was wealthy. He was wealthy, and all he did was paint paintings for he was a man of leisure. It didn't say how he made his money, but it could be that he just inherited from his father, and that's why the sister lived there too, because she was also inherited. She also inherited.
They didn't say whether she wasn't married. She was kind of a spinster. She was jealous.
Yeah, she lived there.
Sister-in-law a little bit.
Well, think about it. I mean, this woman comes out of left field. Suddenly she wants to marry your brother, and you've been living there, and now your income is threatened by this woman. I mean, because should the husband die, she becomes the executor of the estate or the head of the estate.
Well, now that everybody's dead, the sister is set for life.
The sister is set for life, yes, and then she can.
But the thing is, what I quite liked about the sister, though, it wasn't about the money; it was for the love of her brother, though, wasn't it?
She did.
Because at the end of it, I mean, when she finds out her brother's dead, it's like she just shrieks and cries, like basically her world's ended.
Yeah, it was.
And I quite like that, because normally that's not what you would get in these. Kind of like, okay, well, sad.
Well,
that he's
really,
dead.
When Ray Milland came back from the dead, he killed Alan Napier. He electrocuted him.
Right.
And then he goes after her, and that's when Richard Nye comes in and they start fighting at the grave, and he gets shot and killed by his sister, and Nye tries to dig up Hazel Court, who by now has more than dirt in her mouth. She's got a lot of dirt in her mouth. Her whole face is covered, and she's pretty much dead. She's not really. That's the unusual thing. See, she wasn't under there that long, so she probably wasn't really dead. They knew life.
I was thinking they could have revived her, sort of.
Yeah, they could have used emergency. They could have used mouth to mouth or whatever, and she could have come to life. But instead, she's the one who dies prematurely, and she's the one who was prematurely buried. And that's what killed her.
Because she was really bitchy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what I quite liked about the movie, though, is how you see guys so preoccupied by his obsession with premature death or premature burial that basically just drives him mad. And I've seen people who have like strong phobias, and that you can see it does drive them mad.
It probably resonates into certain people's lives because, I mean, I'm sure it's something people have thought about at least maybe once when you get older, especially when you start getting our age and stuff. It's like, God, make sure I'm dead for the love of Christ.
I've seen people with a fear of heights, and they go up like a little bit thing, and all of a sudden they just go stiff with fear. It's kind of like, really?
Well, you're attracted to it. You're attracted to it somewhat.
I mean, I always try to drag them up and then make them look over, but sometimes.
Oh no! I could. That was.
You need to face your fear.
Wasn't Guy under medication?
Laudanum, so he could sleep.
Yeah.
Laudanum.
Yeah.
Laudanum, so he could sleep, so he wouldn't. What is laudanum?
It's like
a very strong sedative, extremely strong sedative, like almost like morphine.
Isn't it opium based?
Yeah. So you probably
give it to them on a spoon, or do you put it in a glass and drink it?
Some people used to down it back then.
Yeah. You can normally like mix it with water, and it can come in a powder or come in a liquid, depending on.
Okay. So it makes them feel good.
Edgar Allan Poe actually used to take a lot of it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a laudanum party. I'm stoned on laudanum.
Sounds like a plan to me. I'll definitely get my sleep.
I did really love the movie. Now, here's something that I just read just the other day when I was researching this, that on the original VHS of Premature Burial, at the very beginning, when the title card comes up and says Premature Burial, is when they open up a coffin and they realize that the man inside had been alive at one point and had scratched the inside of the coffin lid. And suddenly the title card comes on over his face, and it says Premature Burial. Right. And then when it was released to DVD, now it says The Premature Burial, and it's a different title card altogether.
Mm.
Oh.
But it's still over the face of the man. I wonder why they would do that. Why would they change it, first of all, and why would they revert it back to, I assume, what it was when it was theatrically released?
Well, I think sometimes sometimes the people who had like video rights for it, sometimes they went to like a cheaper company, and maybe has something.
Yeah, that could be. Because I know sometimes that happens with the music, right? They will actually change background music.
Yeah, because they wouldn't get the music rights, but they would get like the release rights, so they wouldn't get the music. So
right.
I think that happened with Love at First Bite has that problem.
Yeah, Love at First.
I love the nightlife in the original, and then when you see it on video or. I think we reviewed it from the Amazon, didn't we? And that didn't have that song in it. It's like, oh.
No, it has a completely different song, which I thought was so unusual. Just like also the Abominable Dr. Phibes, at the very end of the movie, they played Over the Rainbow. And when it came out on video, it was some other song that was there. So obviously they couldn't get the rights to the movie. Because I assume that when they made all the arrangements for these movies way back when, even when at Love at First Bite, they weren't thinking about videotapes.
Well, I think what happened was I think that it all came to play with Peggy Lee, and the reason that when Disney Tramp, and she sued them, didn't she? And she sued, and she didn't sue them. Yeah, and she sued them because of the music. That she deserved some royalties because of the music, because it's her singing voice, and she wrote 2 of the songs, didn't she, or 3 of the songs?
Right.
And then I think after that, that's probably what changed the face of like video and releases.
Well, she wrote the most famous. I mean, the Siamese Cat song is probably the most famous song that's in the movie. Wouldn't you say?
He's
or
a
is
tramp
it Bella?
As well. He's
a tramp. Oh, that's right. She sang that. And Bella Nante. Bella Nante is one too. Yeah, well, it kind of looked like her. I mean, wasn't it done in her image?
What a
the
doll!
Dog done in her image. The face of the dog, the hair. Yeah, what a dog! I remember that.
I saw Peggy Lee after she had the stroke, and it was the most horrible thing because she had a stroke and she could only sing out of one side of her mouth. So it was like blah 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 blah. It was just really sad. Poor thing.
Yeah, I read that she had to have oxygen by her stage and all that stuff. They wheel her off and they wheel her on like a mannequin. Horrible.
Yeah.
Well, she went out. She was a trooper.
That's right.
Yeah,
she had some serious kahunas.
Yeah, you got to hand it to entertainers like that. She was famous, too.
Yeah.
And she was married to Jack Webb. I can't imagine that, but she was married to him for a while.
She was married to quite a few people, though, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I think they got around.
Serial marrier. Yeah, she got around. They all did in those days.
If you weren't married to Peggy Lee, you were nobody.
Exactly.
Like Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah, what was she, 7 or 8? She married Richard.
Lana Turner was up there, too. She's another one that had... Even Judy Garland had quite a few married.
And if she couldn't divorce you, she murdered you and blamed it on the daughter.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's probably what happened. I think they all got together.
Which actress was that?
Lana Turner.
That was Lana Turner.
It was Lana Turner.
Yeah, she's married to someone in the mob, wasn't she?
Yeah.
She was, and they had a fight, and I think she accidentally killed him. And when the daughter came in, and her mother was there too, they all conspired and came up with a story and had the daughter be the blame because being a juvenile, she would be treated,
That's right.
Lightly, and that's exactly what happened.
And then she went on with her life, and didn't she do like Madam X, an imitation of life afterwards? So ruined her career at all.
She did Peyton Place. That's another one. Or was that before? I can't remember.
Yeah, because she kind of got bed with Douglas Sirk, didn't she, and started doing all those movies.
She did, yes. Yeah, she did. She was an old-time movie star. I've seen a lot of those movies. They're very theatrical, and she was... I can see why they were popular, though. She was beautiful when she was young, when she was in stuff like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And The Postman Always Rings Twice. That's a great movie, too.
Yeah. I like Lana Turner. I love Madam X and Imitation of Life. If you watch those movies, if you don't have a bit of a tear in your eye, you're just a cold-hearted person that shouldn't be living.
That's because Keir Dullea was her son, right? Keir Dullea was her son, and he was defending her or whatever, and he did not know that was his mother because evil Constance Bennett had prevented it or something like that.
Yeah, and then Imitation of Life, where at the end she's like, "Mother, I'm so sorry, Mother." And she's running towards the coffin with the white horses.
Yeah, I mean, what a funeral! It makes the funeral that's going on right now pale in comparison.
I know.
Didn't they have like Mahalia Jackson singing songs and all that?
Yeah, precisely. And it's not a funeral unless Sandra Dee's there, so.
Well, the little girl was trying to pass for white, and her mother comes to the classroom and walks in. You forgot your galoshes. It's like, oh, God, Mother, did you have to show up right now? Come on. She was trying to pass for white, the little girl. Yeah. So she couldn't do it with her mother around.
And then she's working that strip joint, which is like the weirdest strip joint ever. Where they're on a carousel, lifting their legs up and down. And
weren't they sitting in cocktail glasses? Or is that my imagination?
Yeah, no, they were in that as well. And it's kind of like...
whatever happened to that actress, Susan Kohner? She disappeared.
No, she probably couldn't pass for white anymore after that movie, so...
Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Have you ever seen the original with Claudette Colbert?
Yes, I did. I did, because it was about pancakes, wasn't it? Wasn't that her big thing? I like Claudette Colbert.
Wasn't it? So,
I mean, they did treat black people, that's a whole other subject, but Hayley McDaniel, for example, I mean, when she went back to Warner Brothers after winning an Oscar, she'd ask in a movie like In This Our Life with Bette Davis and Olivia de Havilland, she's like sixth billed in that movie. Yeah. She's way lower than Olivia de Havilland, even though she beat her at the Academy Awards.
Right.
Have you seen that movie? That's what Bette Davis was so awful. So I think that was her worst as far as evil role that she ever had. She played Stanley. Did you ever see it, Vicki?
What movie?
In This Our Life is the name of it.
No, I don't believe
I've seen that one.
Bette
Davis and Olivia de Havilland, they're sisters. And, of course, Olivia is the nice girl. And she's the bitch.
I know I've seen it. I don't recall all of it, but I know
They did two movies together. It's not Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte that they did after whatever Heather Virginia is the one.
Olivia de Havilland and her sister Joan Fontaine.
No,
well, they never acted together. That would have been an interesting movie.
Yeah, they hated each other, didn't they?
Well, I know they hated each other. That's why I was confused for a second. I thought, did they do a movie together? Now that
Betty Davis and Libby de Havilland did 2 movies together. It's the one that Rod just mentioned in Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte.
Right.
Oh, they made more than that, Keith. They did The Private Life of Elizabeth and Essex, and they made another movie too. Some other movie in the 30s that was another comedy. It's Love on Napier, I think.
She's quite evil, though, isn't she, Libby de Havilland?
Evil in real life?
There's never a lot of nice words said about her, is there?
Well, she just swore like a trooper and told it like it is. And, women like that, they always get dogged when they tell it like it is. So
see, I always remember Libby de Havilland in that movie in Lady in the Cage, where she's like this really controlling mother, and she's locked in the elevator, and people are looting her house during a heat wave.
I saw that too.
Please,
I saw that. She's great. Please, what's happening to humanity?
And her son's committed suicide, didn't he, or something? So because she was an overbearing mother.
He committed suicide because he was her gay son, and he was he had it up to here with her because she always wanted to go on vacations with him, and he couldn't live his lifestyle with her, stifling him. And she saw it as completely different. And James Caan, I guess, even though he was the evil guy, kind of
over his face.
Opened her eyes. Yeah, he opened her eyes. I never liked James Caan. I still don't like him. Never liked him as an actor.
I like some of his roles.
He acts the same in every movie. Although he was good in Brian's Song, which is a forgotten movie now, but remember that was a big deal.
Still makes me freaking cry.
Yeah, well, it's a great movie, great TV movie.
Yeah.
Plus, it was a true story, wasn't it? I mean, it was true.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and had a theme song as well that did very well, didn't it?
Yes,
by Michel Legrand. Whatever happened to him? I assume it's a him.
I think he wrote songs from Barbra Streisand for a while, didn't he?
I know he wrote the song to Romeo and Juliet. Whatever that song was, that was a big hit.
Oh, that one, yeah.
Yeah, where do I begin? Where do I begin to tell the story of a... No, that's Love Story theme.
That's Love Story.
Oh, that Love Story?
Yeah. That's a Love Story theme. I think he wrote that one too, though, Michel Legrand. He was, I assume it was Michel as a male. I can't imagine it being a female. Hi, my name is Michel Legrand. So
Michael.
Anyway,
just call me Michael.
Yeah, just call me Michael.
Well, now that we've digressed from the Premature Burial.
Yes. I really enjoyed Premature Burial. And I've been listening to your podcasts, and I think the podcasts are all great.
Okay, that brings us to our final thoughts. So, Vicki, what are your final thoughts of the Premature Burial on book and screen?
I love the story because it's probably one of the easier reads that Edgar Allan Poe had written. And the reason I like that, because every time we do it, Edgar Allan Poe, and I've always liked him, but I mean, I have to go back and reread it and sometimes cheat by going into stuff and looking it up. So what did I just read? Because sometimes he's so hard to follow, and he doesn't seem, sometimes his writing doesn't relate well or transition well into our century, but they're all good. But this one I thought was morbidly fascinating because he was just a morbidly fascinating, dark human being for an author. And as far as the movie, I loved it. I watched it twice. I thought it was great. I don't know why this one I liked so much. I don't know if it was just the acting. I don't know if it's because don't get me wrong, I like Vincent Price and stuff, but I liked what they did with this with Ray Milland because it just kind of jumped off the screen at you. Like I said, I had to watch it twice because I was trying to figure out the plot twists and whatnot. But I wouldn't call it a horror film either, more like a psychological twist thriller kind of thing, because you can tell Ray Milland is just totally bent out of shape about, this aspect of being buried alive, which is obviously a rampant issue back in Victorian times. But I really think everybody that likes these kind of films, it's definitely a must-see because it's just fascinating the way it was done. And they do incorporate a lot of the originality from Edgar Allan Poe, original story.
And what about yourself, Rod? What are your final thoughts?
Well, I have to echo what Vicki said. I would recommend reading the short story first before you see the movie, because it's so different, but yet not different. Because they do incorporate a lot of what Poe says in the story into the actual script of the movie. As far as Edgar Allan Poe movie adaptations go, meaning the Poe cycle, this one stands out because obviously there's no Vincent Price character in it. And Vincent Price had become synonymous with these Edgar Allan Poe movies. It was like, you cannot have an Edgar Allan Poe movie without Vincent Price. In fact, if he makes a movie, we're going to try to connect it to Edgar Allan Poe because he's in it, like they did with The Conqueror Worm, which has nothing to do with Edgar Allan Poe. And The Haunted Palace is the same way.
Right.
So
it's kind of like an aside.
Yeah, an aside. I mean, Haunted Palace was more Lovecraftian, and you can tell it's the whole thing about Lovecraft. And then Witchfinder General, which is the real name of The Conqueror Worm, is just about basically a true story, I guess, or based on real people that lived, and it has nothing to do with Poe. They tacked on a reading of The Conqueror Worm by Price to legitimize it. But I think his absence from the Premature Burial casts a completely different feel to the movie. I love the way it looks. I love the set-bound pieces. I love the music, especially is powerful. I thought Ray Milland was an inspired choice to play that character. I thought all the characters took it very seriously, played it straight, and that's how I like my horror films. There was no theatricalness to it. What is the word? Theatricality? No, I can't even think of the word.
I can't even say that word. Whatever the hell you're trying to say.
Theatrical quality to the acting.
Theatricality.
That. Where it's a little fruity, over the top, like, oh, woe is me. You don't see that in this movie. It's all like forward. And what I like is the wife, who's presented as being this beautiful, gorgeous, I love you guy, I'll do anything for you. Woman is really somebody who's so duplicitous. What's the matter there? I can't even think of these words. Duplicious, is that the word?
Duplicitous.
Where she is planning this thing, knowing that that's his greatest fear. You know, I mean, she knew this because he made it clear to her. This is my greatest fear in life, is that I'm going to end up buried alive. So she makes sure that it comes true. And that was terrible of her to do that. No wonder he went nutty in the end and takes care of her like he...
She had it coming. She had it
coming. But I do have to go along with what you said, Dickie. What was the turning point where he suddenly realized that she had done this? That's not clear.
Probably when he woke up in the cemetery.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with him because, of course, there's doctors involved and all that stuff. It's not just her that says what. And plus, they had a window in the coffin, which I thought was really odd.
They used to do that back then, though.
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah.
His eyes were open. His eyes were open. I mean, that would be something unusual if you look in there and you saw the person with his eyes open when you know they're closed. Not only that, but they gum them so they don't open up.
Yeah, they're not supposed to open up.
And put pennies on them.
Put pennies on them, yes. So I was trying to figure out where this was supposed to be located. Did they say where this is? Did they say it was the United States? Did they say
I think it's American.
British aristocrat.
Aristocrat. Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Says Guy Carell, British aristocrat who is consumed with the fear of being buried alive.
Okay.
That's all it says, so I'm assuming it's the UK.
Oh, okay. I just assumed that
they
were
I really
American,
enjoyed it.
Because I didn't get a lot of a British accents. So.
Well, Ray Milland's accent was more Americanized by then, I would say. He had lost...
Yeah.
Well, he's not even British, is he? I mean, wasn't he from Wales? So
Poor man.
Wasn't Wales part of the UK?
It is, but it's his own country.
Prince of Wales.
It's a bit like calling Canada part of America.
Right.
That way. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like calling Scotland. Scotland's part of the UK, but it's its own country.
Right.
They have their own.
Yeah, and Ireland.
They have their own government.
Ireland too. Ireland as well, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I really enjoyed it. The movie was very stylish. It doesn't get the respect it deserves.
No.
And I'm glad that it started me as a Ray Milland fan, because I've seen some great movies. The Lost Weekend is a great film. Uninvited is a great film, great scary ghost story.
Yeah.
And it is a legitimate ghost story, not a fake. It's a real ghost story. Have you seen it?
Which one is it? I'm always
The Uninvited Guest.
What's
The Uninvited.
The Uninvited Guest.
Uninvited Guest. I don't know if I saw it, but I'm going to write it down because I'm always looking for something new and cool.
It was made in the 40s, and it's about a haunted house, and there's a real ghost, which you see several times. And Ray Milland is young, as you might imagine.
Right.
And he was adept at drama, but he was also adept at comedy. Like he made The Major and the Minor with Ginger Rogers, which is quite a funny movie. He's made lots of quality films.
He's a very diverse actor, from what I've noticed this week after watching several of his films.
Well, have you ever seen The Big Clock? That was a movie that he made with Charles Laughton. That was also very good. And he's just done a lot of stuff. He was acting all the way through the 50s. Oh, he made Dial M for Murder. That's a very famous film for Hitchcock. So that was in the 50s. That was like 54 or somewhere around there. But he was a great actor. And then he went on from this to doing movies like Man with the X-Ray Eyes, but he also did Love Story.
Right.
He played Ryan O'Neal's father in both of the movies because there was a sequel to it.
Okay.
So he acted, and plus he did Frogs. I mean, who could forget Frogs? I mean, come on. And he went from being a young man that was dashing to being a grumpy old man. That's how he was at the end.
That's what happens when we get older. We're becoming a grumpy old biddies.
Yeah, we're grumpy.
Get off my grass.
Play ball somewhere else. I'm keeping your ball.
I'm so bitter, flowers wither when I walk by.
Yeah, my mother was like that. She was like that with kids on the street. Stop playing ball in front of my house. Yeah. I tell her, ignore them. Then when the ball would fall over you, she'd keep it.
He used to take our wiffle ball when it would go into his garden. My brothers would make me go in his garage and steal the wiffle ball back. My brothers were such bastards back then.
You had to deal with the old man.
If he caught me in his garage, there was only one way in and one way out, man. But go, Vic, go get it, Vic, go get it. And I was like 5 years old. My brothers were so mean to me when I was a kid.
Was he mean to you, the man?
Oh, he was just a crotchety old man that get pissed off if our wiffle ball or whatever went into his tomato patch.
Interesting.
He was crotchety. What was his name? Mr. Montague. That was his name.
That sounds like a name for somebody who crotchety.
And Mr. Cushiony was on the other. Mr. Cushiony was on the other side. Either way, I was screwed as a child.
Well,
my final thoughts on Premature Burial is that I think I love the way that Poe basically sets up about how I love like the case that you kind of get. So that way it's like you kind of get like this background history and then it pulls you into the story itself. And I thought that was very clever. And as far as the film goes, yeah, it's one of those films that's it's a forgotten classic. And I think people need to rediscover it because it lends itself to so much of it has this German expressionistic way it's filmed that I quite like, and I call like a colorized version of it. And I quite like the casting choices, and I quite like the way some of the camera angles, and basically that it depends on putting yourself into the mind of the main character about whether you would find it scary or not. And I think that it does kind of accomplish that very well. And I think that Ray Milland actually is able to do this, where I'm afraid that if Vincent Price did that, I think we might not have got the finished product that we got.
You're
right.
I'm
saying this, and I love Vincent Price. I'm a huge Vincent Price fan, but I think this film is better for having Ray Milland in it.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that brings us to the end of the Literary License Podcast. And next week, we'll be doing our 2-for-1. We'll be covering Hard Candy about pedophilia and Ex Machina about a robot who's looking for a soul, which is part of our How to Find Your Destiny month. And, of course, you can locate us on the www.llpodcast.com website and make sure you sign up to our newsletter. And we'll be seeing you next week. And just remember to be kind and love one another. And we'll be here next week with 2 for 1. And it's goodbye for myself and goodbye, Vicky.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Goodbye, Rod.
Take care and be healthy.
And we'll see you next week with Hard Candy and Ex Machina.
You can't stop an avalanche as it races down the hill. You can try to stop the seasons, girl, but you know you never will. And you could try to stop my dancing feet, but I just cannot stand still. 'Cause the world keeps spinning round and round, and my heart's keeping time to the speed of sound. I was lost till I heard the drums, and I found my way. 'Cause you can't stop the beat. Ever since this whole world began, a woman found out she should get, she could shake up a man. So I'm gonna shake and shimmy it the best that I can today. 'Cause you can't stop the motion of the ocean, of the sun and the sky. You could wonder if you wanna, but I never ask why. And if you try to hold me down, I'm gonna spit in your eye and say that you can't stop the beat. You can't stop the river as it rushes to the sea.
You can try to stop the hands of time, but you know it just can't be.
And if they try to stop us seaweed, I'll call the NAACP. 'Cause the world keeps spinning round and round, and my heart's keeping time to the speed of sound. Till I heard the drums and I found my way. 'Cause you can't stop the beat. Ever since we first saw the light, a man and woman like to shake it on a Saturday night. So I'm gonna shake and shimmy it with all of my might today. 'Cause you can't stop the motion of the ocean or the rain from above. You can try to stop the paradise we're dreaming of, but you cannot stop the rhythm of two hearts in love to stay. 'Cause you can't stop the beat.
You can't stop my happiness, 'cause I like the way I am. And you just can't stop my knife and fork when I see a Christmas ham. So you